Good morning. Welcome to this attempt to get to work. Didn't get stuck in the driveway. So far, so good. So, Xa Lee was going over one of my keyboard designs, and he had some complaints, not about the design necessarily, but about just the process of getting a DIY keyboard going. And he mentioned getting him something that can run QMK. And I was like, oh, he can run QMK, so like he's got some experience with this. And apparently that was not really so. Otherwise I would have given him a teensy and easy AVR or something like that, something a bit easier to run. But the fact remains, this is, the DIY keyboard scene and the custom programmable scene it's not that accessible. And as much as easy AVR accomplishes, when you say, download this programmable keyboard tool, it's like, whoa, what's a download? No, not that remedial, but I understand. Because there was a time when I did not know about Linux, and people are like, just do this, and it's like, I don't understand any of the words that you used in that sentence. So I think my first task is going to be making a short video on how to use the keyboard layout, or kbfirmware.com, to modify your keyboard layout. And probably use what is it called, the QMK toolkit. I think that's probably the right thing to do. Programming that on Linux is annoying. Like, what is it, AVR dude or something? Like, I do it, so it's so annoying how many things you have to get at the same time that I usually make a script for it. But again, this is just not an indicator of something that is easy or accessible. The other potential is using something, so that there's a few ways around this. One is to try to make videos and make things as step by step as possible. I even have a Windows box now, and I can use that for recording what you would do on a Windows box, if you had a Windows box for some reason. But he's completely right. There's an accessibility issue there, and I have been somewhat surprised, although I guess I shouldn't be, that the people that buy my keyboards very rarely reach out to me for comments on how to get it installed or how to get it set up, and often didn't even go over my configuration information, and instead figured out their own pinouts, made a schematic with their multimeter, and then said, here's where the pins go, here are the rows and columns, and now I'm going to write software for it. I'm going to build my own QMK board layout for it. Whoops, should have this on. And I'm like, okay, but I already did that, right? So, programmable keyboards should not be DIYers building for DIYers, or it said like makers. Makers assume everyone else is a maker. And while I was listening to it on my drive home, I was like, but it's so easy. I'm like, no, dummy. It's not easy to everyone. So, so the potential is to make a video where everything's as step-by-step as possible. The other potential is something I've thought about for a while, is just making my own keyboard firmware in Arduino, because you can program those Pro Micros very easily with Arduino software suite, and it's very easy to download the Arduino software suite. As much as I don't like these like blobs of packages, the Arduino who is it? I think it was Ben Heck. Ben Heck was talking about the... Come on. Sorry, just trying to melt the ice here. Ben Heck was talking about the new, was it Raspberry Pi Pico, I think? And how you have to install all these software and drivers and everything just to get it going. It's like you have layers of software that has to work together and obviously be configured together to get it to work. Whereas compared to Arduino, you download a giant zip file of a folder and then you drop the folder somewhere and then you run it. And that's it. And it seems bad, but it does work and it is very practical. It's easy to set up, so yeah, you know, it works. The only reason I hadn't done some kind of Arduino building before, there we go, Arduino firmware before, is because it was like, well, there's no way I'm going to compete with the amount of work and features that's gone into QMK. It's extremely well featured, but the fact of the matter is, most people, well, frankly, most people don't even reprogram the keyboards, and even fewer people use those complicated features or advanced features. So it's, you know, they're not really reaping any benefit from that. So if it were Arduino programmable, and the Arduino programming is, and it's good, it's fast, and it's cross-platform, it's hard to ask for more. Plus, this is also something that would be supported by the keyboard. And the alternative would be to just use one of the more, you know, you just use QMK, just use Easy AVR. So it's not going to diminish your options. It just might make it more accessible to people who are not willing to dive into the keyboard firmware to customize things. So that makes a bit of sense. I also have some, there's features, you know, like the mouse control and mic and stuff like that, the macro building, and then like displays and stuff. I'm gonna try hard not to overkill it. Although a Teensy 3.2 I think is excellent way to run that. You know, if I had a little more memory and a little more speed, it wouldn't. I could, frankly, I could make sloppier code. But there's a limit to writing in pure assembly and writing in, you know, an interpreted language, GUI-based drag and drop little shapes and icons. So you can get toward the middle is all right. The closer you get to machine code, you know, the easier things are, the harder things get, and then you get to the point where you're just writing a series of ones and zeros. So I want it to be easy to modify and easy to maintain, because that's the thing. I want people to be able to look at it and say, oh, I can kind of figure this out, and I'm not going to get there with, you know, doing things in a bunch of sending commands in straight hex. I want things to be readable and friendly, accessible, so that people feel emboldened to mess around with their keyboard firmware and say, what if I do it this way, and what if I change that, and will this work, will that work? I haven't run into any problems with a full, I don't suppose it matters. I expect to be able to make use of most of the Arduino libraries. I hope I don't have to do much heavy modification. Obviously, it's better if you know, write your own write your own USB interface and do it all yourself, but I don't know how necessary it's going to be. I am a very fast typist. I do burst up pretty high. It's 130 or something like that. And I am one of the people who can test our keyboards for fast typists. It's funny, we have like prototypes and stuff, and people are like, oh no, this is fine, and I immediately find problems with it. But I'm finding it has to be, well, I use a lot of key combinations, and I type fast, so, and I slur keys a lot. So I'll find every little issue. Unless there's some issue related to typing slowly, I suppose. So I say that because it may be that Arduino library is not polished enough, which is par for the course, I think. I've run into a number of Arduino libraries where I'm like, why'd they do it like this? This is a bug. Like, why don't we fix this? And people are like, oh yeah, I found that bug. Just change this variable and just move on. Shouldn't the library be fixed? And then like in a year or something, it's fixed. You know, it doesn't advance super fast, but it's open source and it's plodding along. And plus, maybe, hey, I can contribute. Maybe if there's an improvement that can be made to the keyboard HID library, then maybe I can offer that. So the ideal, and I'm not gonna let the ideal get in the way of the practical or of the attainable. The ideal would be to have the keyboard be have a menu, a display, a small display. To think about that, I might have to cut off the display while normal keyboard operation is happening. I don't know. Reduce the cycles on it. But the keyboard would have, ideally, would have a display and a way to enter a menu for the display. I'd like to have a jog dial, and I could probably run that with interrupts, I guess. The jog dial being a separate interface is, I mean, ostensibly, you wouldn't be, like, I don't know, maybe you would. You'd have Sunvox open, and you're, like, playing the piano on the keys while you're twisting the rotary encoder to make, you know, change settings on the, it's like a MIDI device or something. Of course, the jog dial, or rather the rotary encoder doesn't have any, it's only really there to an alternative form of input. You can interface with the menu by just using whatever arrow keys are available, or, you know, WASD for left and right menuing and stuff like that. And then you would be able to do things like change the layout of everything. Well, that's interesting. So you change the layout of the WASD keys, and then you might find that the menu doesn't work, so that would have to supersede any user customization. So building out an object for that, for the matrix positions, and I think I fit here. Yeah, we're fine. The idea would be that you could use that menu interface on that display to change what the keys do built into the keyboard entirely. Doing things like building macros and stuff. I just don't like people to have to get into the code. I mean, I want them to, obviously, but they have displayed a recalcitrance that is not something I'm willing to fight against. Just giving people the opportunity to say, hey, you know, what if I don't want to do that? What if that's just scary and spooky and I don't want to mess around with it? Looking at the code, you know, Saw said something about it yesterday. He said, well, like if I mess up one of these settings, I'm gonna brick my keyboard, essentially. And I was like, yeah, that's, you know, it's not true because you can recover from it, but it certainly seems that way. And that's an image problem or an understanding problem that should be addressed. And having something that is an external user interface, you know, in the form of a menu and a display and controls for that menu to be able to say, change this key position into that key, or, you know, put caps lock to control, that kind of thing. That seems very easy and accessible. Plus, it's all just software, man, you know? So we can tweak things later if we need to or have to, and if things get too complicated, which, again, most people just, they might not have this problem at all. They might not even care about the code, or they might set it up once and then adapt themselves, you know, pick a layout and say, that's my layout, and then work on that layout, work on learning that one, instead of saying, is this optimal? Do I want to change it? Do I want to update it? Just learn whatever the layout is. Oh yeah. So it makes sense to do this, and it certainly makes sense to have that external interface. I think there are features of the keyboard that I would sacrifice in order to have that external interface. Just a, you know, I2C menu. Yeah, I'm already doing some of this. I'm already doing much of this at this point, actually. Yep. I've got the Vexus running Arduino, pulsing and sensing the keyboard, and then handling a menu interface for it. And then I've got Mike running keyboard to HID and mouse to HID, along with that menu interface and the serial interface too. Don't forget that serial interface. I really like that serial interface. Which is an option if you're if we get out of, you know, if there's not room for the display, or if the display kills the CPU to the point that the keyboard's not responsive enough. You know, you have to poll every so many milliseconds. Run that poll as fast as you can. So then, even if it's not an external display, you can take the keyboard and open up a COM port. See, I've already lost everyone. It's not that hard to say, you know, download Arduino, open it up, click serial monitor, and then, hey presto, there's your info. Here's your setting, 1152.00. Well, we made it. Alright, I'm gonna think more about this. Good talking to you this morning. Snowy morning.